Welcome to Awesome Movie Year, the podcast where we take a look back at an awesome year for movies, which is every year. My name is Josh Bell, film critic and writer, and I'm joined by my co-host.
I'm Jason Harris, filmmaker, comedian. Whoa. You're telling me you want a girl to fight?
Oh, crazy. Jason is here ready for his boxing match. He's got his shirt off. He's raring to go.
Dave, make sure you put that on the Patreon. We'll finally get some subscribers there.
Yeah. Well, what's the whole fight talk about? Well, in this season of Awesome Movie Year, we are talking about the films of the year 2000. And we are here at, I guess, like part 2 of the Sundance Film Festival winner episode. We decided that since there was a tie for the Sundance Grand Jury Prize this year, that we would talk about both movies. So last episode was our episode on You Can Count on Me, the Kenneth Lonergan film, and it tied for that prize with Karyn Kusama's Girlfight, her first film as well, and the debut for Michelle Rodriguez. So a notable movie for those reasons, but one that had been unavailable basically to watch until very recently. It worked out well for us.
Yeah. I mean, we could have found it, Josh. We can always find things.
Well, yeah. I mean, it was not streaming, and it's still, I believe, it's on the Criterion channel now, which is how we all watched it, but is not available any other way, not for digital purchase or rental either. And Criterion has put out a fancy new Blu-ray edition of it, but otherwise it had not been streaming or available to rent or buy. And the previous DVD was out of print and was from 20 years ago or something like that. So it was really out of circulation up until very recently.
Because they knew we were covering an awesome movie year, and they said, hey, we want to get all that juice, awesome movie juice, baby.
Yeah.
So now they're juiced up from us.
It's the famous Awesome Movie Year bump. It applies to any movie that we talk about here on the show.
Josh, at Sundance, Kusama also won Best Director.
Yeah, and it's kind of an interesting balance because You Can Count on Me won the Screenwriting Award. So we've got kind of both of those covered.
Yeah, but the Screenwriting Award is called the Waldo Salt Award, so it's got like a cool name. Best Director is just Best Director.
Yeah. Well, I think Waldo Salt must have been a famous screenwriter that they named that in honor of him. But no famous directors, so you can't name
There's none.
Yeah, don't exist. It won a lot of other awards, even though it had been out of circulation for a long time and feels like it's fallen into semi-obscurity. At the time it came out, it was highly acclaimed. It did get a lot of critics groups awards and stuff like that. It won the Best Debut Performance Award for Michelle Rodriguez and was nominated for Best First Feature at the Independent Spirit Awards. But I think unlike You Can Count on Me, which also got a lot of awards from critics groups, but then kind of made it into that upper tier of awards with Oscar nominations and also did quite well at the box office for a movie at this level. This didn't quite get to that same place. It grossed $1.7 million on its eventual release on its budget of $1 million, and presumably with promotion and whatever, that doesn't really qualify as a profitable success. So it didn't quite translate into the same mainstream popularity that You Can Count on Me had got.
Well, it was troubled from before it started, before the movie was about to shoot, 48 hours, in fact, before the financiers just backed out. And indie filmmaking hero John Sayles and his partner Maggie Renzi decided they would fund it with help from IFC. So they made a movie. It did well with all that stuff going. I don't think they could have many complaints.
Right. I mean, it turned out well, but I think, and maybe we'll talk about in the legacy, especially for Karyn Kusama, it didn't launch her career maybe in the same way that she would have hoped that it would. But yeah, all credit to John Sayles, who also has a small role here as a science teacher. He was a mentor of Karyn Kusama's and obviously was a believer in this project and is a longtime supporter of independent film. And of course, sadly, she had a lot of, doors slammed. I'm sure she was trying to get this made and suggestions of why is it about a Latina woman? Why is it not about a white dude? That kind of stuff. So,
yeah. And watching it now, that's a criticism that's almost unfair that I have, but it feels very dated because of the proliferation of women's combat sports and everything like that.
I think, yeah, I mean, as a sport, that's expanded a huge amount. I don't know that there's been quite as many movies about women in those sports as there are about men, or as there are women actual athletes competing and achieving that popularity. But
Maybe not, but there are plenty of them.
yeah,
So
it does follow a lot of familiar beats. But I think one of the things about it that makes it stand out, especially at this time, is that those familiar beats were always done with male characters, mostly white male characters, and so this has a different angle on it. But yeah, good for John Sayles. And also, I don't know if this is one of the earliest IFC films, but now, of course, IFC Films is a major indie distributor, and the thing that it's named after, the Independent Film Channel, no longer even exists. But at this time, it was mainly the channel. And so I did love seeing at the beginning credits where it's like, the Independent Film Channel presents, like something that
I always like that too. IFC was a cool thing back in the day, and we can't have cool things anymore, Josh.
well, we have some different cool things, but yeah, that's true. So good for them for
Like
stepping up.
Pogs?
Pogs,
You
yeah,
mean like Pogs?
a lot of pogs going on.
Hey, Josh, but speaking of not having cool things, a little anecdote, a little personal anecdote, Josh. That's how I relate to the audience
All
by
right.
telling them personal anecdotes. A few years ago, when I was working for Bleacher Report, a script came across my way, and it was a script by John Sayles, and they were asking me if I knew anyone who would finance it because John Sayles couldn't get the financing.
Oh, that is sad. I feel like, did we talk about this when we talked about John Sayles in our Lone Star episode? I don't know, but did that movie ever get made?
I don't think it got made, Josh.
Oh, that's unfortunate. Yeah, John Sayles, I'm sure we talked about in that episode, it's been quite a while since he's directed a film. But I mean, he is really like one of these godfathers of not only independent cinema, but especially this kind of like small scale, like working class story. That was what he did for years and years. And so it's nice to see him supporting someone else doing that same kind of thing.
Yeah, go John Sayles.
Yes. So critics were generally quite positive about this film, although it was funny and interesting watching the Ebert and Roper segment. Ebert liked this movie a lot, gave it thumbs up. Roper gave it a thumbs down. And, I feel like we've on the show and just in general, people talk a lot about the Siskel and Ebert relationship and how they would kind of take each other down and stuff like that. And Ebert and Roper don't quite have that same relationship. But in this segment, it is great as Roper starts talking about his criticisms. And his main criticism of this film is that he didn't believe Michelle Rodriguez's performance. And he starts talking about he doesn't buy her as a boxer. And Ebert just gives him this great look like, oh, you dumb motherfucker. And it's beautiful. And then Roper just keeps digging his grave because Ebert is making all these arguments about, I think, Jason, you know more about this than I do, but it seems like the women's combat sports that you're talking about, this is kind of in its early stages at this point. But Ebert had obviously seen some documentary and he's like, oh, well, what about this woman or whatever? And Roper calls female boxers a novelty act. And Ebert is just like, oh, man, what is wrong with you? It's quite an amusing segment.
Yeah, I mean, obviously at this point it's not, but in professional sports and professional wrestling, women were a novelty act for a long time, right? You put them on the card as an in-between or a popcorn break. And this is not me knocking them. I'm a big fan. I've written for women combat sports fighters, as you know, Josh. So it's come a long way. Christy Martin, Layla Ali were the big-time boxers. Of course, Ronda Rousey was probably the MMA star that kind of kicked that into the next level.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it's not that they weren't treated that way, but that they shouldn't have been treated that way. And furthermore, that like the entire message of this movie is that they shouldn't be treated that way. And yet Roper is just dismissing them all exactly as they have been.
Right. It's a tough one. Like, I'm not agreeing with him. I didn't see it. I'm more interested in hearing why he doesn't think Michelle Rodriguez pulls it off as a boxer, because her physical presence is probably the best part of her with that attitude and lends a lot to the believability of that part.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and I think that it starts out like that, where he's just specifically saying he didn't buy into her in this role. And Ebert obviously is not down with that. And the biggest selling point, I think, for this movie, and at the time too, when Michelle Rodriguez was an unknown and this was her first role, was what a strong presence she has in this role. And she's very believable, not only as this tough working class teenager, but also as an accomplished boxer who can win the fights that she wins in this film. I 100% believed it.
She trained for 4 months, 6 days a week to get into boxing shape for this one, Josh.
Yeah, Roper, not training to be a boxer.
I used to train with a boxing coach, as you know, and nothing will get you into shape or make you vomit faster than training with a boxing coach.
All right. Well, I will not be doing that. So Roger Ebert in his written review said, Girlfight looks like a sports picture, but it's really more of a character study in which boxing is the way that Diana finds direction in her life. Yes, the movie leads up to the obligatory big fight, but what is proven in the fight settles more about the characters and their relationships than it does about the plot. This is a story about a girl growing up in a macho society and, far from being threatened by its values, discovering she has a nature probably more macho than the men around her. Since the movie, written, directed, and produced by women, is deeply aware of that theme, it's always about more than boxing.
Ooh, women talking and boxing?
What will they do next?
Yeah, I mean, it's a gritty New York kind of picture. And the boxing, I think some of the highlights are when like she kind of steps up her training and you get those kind of montages of her really escalating and showcasing her skills. I thought that was some of the best stuff in there.
Yeah, I mean, you also, I think part of the believability too is seeing her progress, and she comes in and obviously she has this natural ability, but she doesn't have any skills. She doesn't have the finesse or whatever, and you can see that develop over time to the point where she can win a fight like as a boxer and not just as like a street fighter.
It's a sweet science, baby.
Yeah, I've heard that. So A.O. Scott in the New York Times said, Ms. Kusama's unassuming script and Patrick Cady's fine, gritty cinematography keep Girlfight anchored in unpretentious realism. Diana and her young male sparring partners and opponents look good, but not too good. They flail with the energy of the youthful amateurs they're meant to be. But the movie belongs to Ms. Rodriguez. With her slightly crooked nose and her glum, sensual mouth, she looks a little like Marlon Brando in his smoldering prime, and she has some of his slow, intense physicality. She doesn't so much transcend gender as redefine it.
Okay. We're going to compare Michelle Rodriguez to Marlon Brando. That's what we're doing now.
I mean, you're saying that with all the knowledge of her subsequent career, and he's saying it only having ever seen this film. So right. In terms of her potential or a raw presence that she has early in her career, I feel like it's an okay comparison.
She definitely has a raw presence, but even here you could see her range is, much like certain boxers, her range is extremely limited, Josh.
I mean, she's not ever called upon to do anything outside of her range here. I mean, you don't know based on this one movie what she will be able to do.
Maybe I'm saying I watched this and I think that performance is a one-note performance, and you're saying that's what it's supposed to be. I'm saying there could have been more nuances to it.
I mean, I'm not saying it's one note or that it's supposed to be one note. I think it's a fully realized character within the context of this movie. Like, I'm not disagreeing with you that Michelle Rodriguez in her subsequent career has sort of picked a very particular lane and stuck with it. But just judging from this film, I think you could see a lot of potential that maybe didn't end up being fully realized.
I think judging from this film, you could see her going into becoming an action star, which is what she is.
That's true, but I feel like she could have easily been an indie dramatic actress if that had gone in that direction, based on what I see in this movie.
You're wrong and I'm right.
Jason, I think like the only time we've talked about Marlon Brando too is in things that you hated. Yeah, the wild one and the Island of Dr. Moreau.
Yeah, but listen, I'm not knocking Marlon Brando as an actor. I don't think it's a good comparison to say Michelle Rodriguez is a young Marlon Brando, Josh.
All right, fair enough. One other thing that A.O. Scott mentions, and I was curious about this, and as, again, someone who doesn't know really anything about boxing, whether the like mixed gender amateur tournaments that they depict in this film are something that really exist. And he, at least in the context of New York State, basically says no. So that's a fictional thing.
It's not a thing. I mean, I didn't take it as on the nose as he did. I took it more along the lines of there's only a few women boxers, and if they don't put them in there, who are they going to box against? You know, as opposed to like a come one, come all type thing. So, but now it wouldn't even be necessary because, as we know, it's a huge sport.
Right, right. I mean, I think that is how they presented in the film, the idea that these rules have been changed because of what you said, that there's only so many female boxers and we got to let them compete or whatever. But I think even during that, even when that was the case, this wasn't something that they didn't open up boxing tournaments in that way. And that's something that Karyn Kusama invented for dramatic purposes for the film.
She probably, if this was a real character, she probably would have had to sue to get into there.
Yeah, that could have happened. So Lisa Schwartzbaum in Entertainment Weekly was a little more critical. She said, Girlfight doesn't entirely avoid the pitfalls of first-time storytelling. A bout in the ring between Diana and Adrian, her boyfriend, strains credulity about gender-blind sporting matches, and her relationships with her family are fraught with excessive tensions and secrets. But Kusama, who along with many on the project developed an indie aesthetic through her work with John Sayles, shows a clear personal filmmaking style, naturalistic, sparsely decorated, and a respect for her characters' weaknesses as well as their moments of athletic beauty. While Rodriguez punches through the indie clutter to announce herself as a superb new movie talent, so Kusama scores big points in her first main event.
You know, I like Karyn Kusama, and I do think this feels like a very much like a first film where it's like you see potential, but it's not all there. I do think the writing is maybe the weakest part of it, along with some performances. I just think they left so many punches not thrown there, Josh, as far as conflict and building dramatic tension. So yeah, I had mixed feelings about it.
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, like I'm with you that the writing was probably the weak element, but I feel like the opposite, that there are too many contrived conflicts. Like as Lisa Schwartzbaum is indicating there, like the idea that her boyfriend is also like her big final opponent in the big match at the end for the championship was just so hard to swallow. You know, I felt like we could have done that differently and still had the romantic relationship and still had the issues that they have around, you know, gender and both of them being boxers and everything. And similarly, the relationship with her father, where he just seems
that's not a relationship at all.
Right. But I mean, I think that's the thing, is that like he just seems like he's kind of vaguely disapproving. And then suddenly we have this big scene where it's basically like, oh, you know, like abused the mother and drove her to suicide. Like it just became this huge, something that would dominate another movie, and that was just dealt with in like one scene.
So to take it from that point and moving back to your first point, I think the dad is a good actor. I actually thought the first scene I saw him in where he's playing cards with his buddies, I'm like, oh, this guy's interesting. I want to see more of what he does. And then he just became a very, very single note stereotype of, why can't you wear a dress? I got to get your brother to box so he can protect himself. Like, it's not even a real character to me at that point. As far as I agree with you in a totally different way, because I think that the climax doesn't work. You're saying it should have never happened that way. And I'm okay with that if it had gone another way and maybe she's like the star boxer and he's her boyfriend, but he gets jealous because he doesn't have the talent that she does.
Exactly.
That's the way we could have taken
it.
I do think you could have made it work where they were going to fight each other, but we hadn't built towards that at all. And so when it happens, there's very low stakes, pretty much in the entire movie for everything. But that just fell flat to me as well.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is that like I like the idea of it being low stakes, that I feel like too many of these sports dramas set up whatever the sporting, you know, event, the big game or the big match or whatever, as like the most important thing in the world. And this is just a story about like a teenager who finds something that she cares about. And I would have been happy to keep it in that low key mode. And I feel like some of those bigger conflicts felt contrived.
Oh, I agree. I just think they could have worked better as if that's the direction they wanted to go in.
Yeah. So, I mean, as we said, given that this movie has been kind of out of circulation for a long time, I don't think any of us had seen it before.
No, and you've seen every other Kusama movie. I have seen all but Aeon Flux, and I like her. I'm a fan of hers, so I was looking forward to it.
Yeah, I mean, you say I've seen every other movie of hers. This is only 4 other movies. I mean, she's had this kind of bumpy career, as we'll talk about more, I'm sure. And I think she's done some good stuff and some stuff I did not care for, but I was definitely curious to see this. And I guess I liked it a little more than you did. I didn't love it, but I mean, I'm glad I checked it out. And Criterion is giving it this big platform right now. So, Dave, had you ever seen this?
No, I don't think I had. Although as I was watching it, there was so much of it that seemed familiar, but maybe like you guys are talking about, a lot of it is a little bit cliche. So maybe that's why I thought I'd seen it before. But yeah, I mean, when picking 2000, this was actually one of the movies on the list where I was like, oh yeah, I'll finally get to see Girlfight.
Right. Yeah. And for me, I mean, a lot of the time I come into these and it's like, oh, there's maybe only a handful of movies that I haven't seen and I'm eager to get to those. And this was one of those for me as well. Like, oh, this will be a good chance to check this out. So I'm glad that I did.
Nice.
Hey, we all watched the movie.
We all watched the movie. That's kind of what we do here at Awesome Movie Year. We watch a movie. We all do it. All 3 of us watch a movie.
Talk about a knockout combination.
Oh, anything else on the background of this film you want to mention, Jason?
So you mentioned Patrick Cady, who was the cinematographer. You know, we've covered Raging Bull on this show, and I think there's a lot of influence in the way that these fight scenes are shot. I like that he used a rig that allowed the actors to hit the camera, and that kind of brought you more into the fights.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll get into more about how those fight scenes come off when we come back and talk more of our general thoughts on Girlfight. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our season on the films of the year 2000, we are talking the second winner of the Grand Jury Prize at Sundance, which is Girlfight, from writer-director Karyn Kusama. And Jason, it seems like maybe you were a little disappointed in this film overall.
Yeah, I'm underwhelmed. It's funny. I would compare it to, and I like the movie I'm about to mention better, but The Wrestler, the Darren Aronofsky movie, where you think like, oh, that movie's totally up my alley. But then I end up liking, The Black Swan, which is about ballet, much more. I was underwhelmed with this. I think there have been so many great boxing movies, and we've talked about some of them. That was one issue for me. The other issues, I think we've talked about the writing. And also, it was tough for me because, see, Josh, you're saying that because you like that it was low stakes. But to me, because this story is so dated now, I think I needed more stakes.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm certainly not as immersed in the world of sports and combat sports in particular as you are. So for me, I felt like I was able to just take it for what it was from being from this time period. And like I said, even that mixed gender boxing, I know little enough that I was like, maybe this is a real thing. I don't know. This seems not real to me, but it wouldn't surprise me if it was something that I just don't know about. So
everything could be real now. You have Mike Tyson fighting Jake Paul. There's no reason they can't get like Ronda Rousey to fight some loudmouth idiot male, it wouldn't be like a sanction. It would be like an exhibition match type.
Right. But the idea here is that this is officially sanctioned only for amateurs, not for professionals, but that, as we pointed out, that they want to give the small number of female boxers a chance to win matches and participate. And so they allow them to fight the male boxers. But what I'm just saying is that, like, I kind of was able to go with it on its own terms in the world that it's in and not feel like, oh, it seems dated or whatever. But I understand that. I mean, I didn't love it, and it does follow a lot of those sports movie cliches, even if it is approaching them slightly differently. And one thing, we just a few episodes ago did an episode on Billy Elliot, which, Jason, was your pick, and that I think came out a few months after this. And in a bunch of reviews of that, I read it, compared it to Girlfight. And, they follow similar formulas. But much like with Darren Aronofsky, you like the ballet movie more than the combat movie.
Not just that, I think he executes the flaws that we're talking about. Because in our conversation, you were talking about that, how this story of the kid who wants to dance follows like a very clear narrative point that we've seen before. I think they execute it with much more depth of hand, both from a written word to the performances to the emotionality of it. It felt like a more realized piece to me and a more fully rounded piece to me.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I probably like them about evenly. Maybe I liked Billy Elliot a little more, but I don't know. I think the performances here are good, and I'm definitely not with you at all on Michelle Rodriguez. I think she's fantastic in this, regardless of what she's done subsequently. I think she's really, really good. And based on this, I would absolutely, if I were like, casting director or whatever at this time, be putting her up for serious dramatic roles. But the
Like
supporting
Blood Rain?
like, yeah, right. I mean, you're judging based on what she actually ended up doing, which is only partially within her control. And if this movie had been a massive hit, maybe she would have gotten different roles too.
I mean, maybe. I mean, we see a lot of young indie ingenues come out and, get those big roles. I'm going to disagree. I just think, like, as that, like, tough, brooding, got to keep my guard up at all times character, she does a good job of that. But I don't think there was any range or levels to this. And I know you're saying, well, you're judging by the rest of her career, but maybe that has something to do with it, that she doesn't have any range or levels beyond what we've seen in this and that going forward.
Well, right. I mean, I'm not even necessarily disagreeing with you that it turned out that she didn't. But I think if you're looking at this performance, you can see the potential there. And I think she could have, maybe if she was given the opportunity. It's not like I can point to a bunch of serious dramas that I saw her in where she was bad.
Well, so to me, I think the bigger failure, I mean, and it's not a failure because she's a franchise queen who's making tons of money on these things, is that I don't think she's been in many good action movies since this point. I think she could have easily been, you could have redone a Rambo or something like that, and she's got that kind of power and presence to her. But I don't think there's really any movies where I'm like, oh, cool, it's a Michelle Rodriguez movie, like, let's get it.
Yeah, well, we'll maybe come back to that because that's a slightly later topic and see if we can get a bit
parse that out.
Yeah. But for now, I mean, I also want to say that I did think the supporting performances here were perfectly solid. I mean, I think you could argue that those supporting characters are underwritten, and I'm with you on that. But I think the performances are good and it's naturalistic. It feels honest. It feels real. So I didn't dislike any of those performances per se.
You thought the younger brother was good?
Yeah, he was fine. I mean, again, it's not like he's got a lot of dimension to his character, but for what he's given, I thought he was perfectly solid.
I mean, maybe this again goes to Kusama being a first-time director, and maybe it's because we've seen her direct things that she hasn't written that are better pieces than this is, right?
Right.
And we've seen her direct pieces that she hasn't written that are definitely worse than this is too. So,
right. And I think, I'm not 100% sure, but I think this may be the only
that she wrote.
The only film that she's made that she wrote. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, again, I'm going to just say, like, I think she's a very good director. I think, all these flaws that we talk about, in a way, go back to her as a writer, but also as a first-time director, So, yeah, I the minor characters who were the best were the boxing coaches, right? Both her boxing coach and the guy, our buddy from Moonstruck, who's just lovely and everything, right?
Yeah.
But because that felt very real to me. The gym felt very real to me. I know Kusama trained as a boxer, and that was or trained in boxing, so that was her inspiration for this story. And that was to me the best stuff when the coach is like kind of giving her tips. He's swinging wildly. Make sure you get inside. Like that very much felt real to me. And I thought they were the best characters. But even then, right, you're getting these little glimpses. Like she goes to the boxing coach's house and the wife's like, oh, yeah, those, she sees a picture. Oh, those are his kids. He doesn't talk to them much. And then we just leave that alone. Right. And it's like there's so many layers that we're not getting that we could get. I was frustrated with this movie, especially at 1 hour and 52 minutes. I thought they could have given us more. And you talk about You Can Count on Me. Man, those characters by the end of that movie.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And I'm just saying that it's not down to the performances, but I think you're right that there are dimensions to those characters that could have been added. I mean, I think also with her coach, who I agree was a good character, and that performance from Jaime Tirelli is quite good. Also, his journey, sort of when she first says, "I want you to train me," he's like, "Nah, women can't box, girls can't box, no way." And then he agrees basically just because he's like, "Oh, she's gonna pay me, and I'll take the money." And the evolution from that to like really believing in her and pushing. I mean, he's her like number one supporter, and he's the one who like makes sure these, rules allow her to compete and all that stuff. It just seemed like there was a missing bridge there, maybe.
There's a lot of that. I agree with you. And it would have been way more effective if we had seen the classic, like, nah, women can't box. And he walks away and he turns around and she's knocking a dude out. And he has like that moment of clarity. And you could tie that into the money aspect of like the gym's failing and he needs a new star, whatever it is. Right. But I agree with you. And, Josh, to go along with that, I think one of the weaknesses is you're okay with it being low stakes. And I can get that. But there's never any conflict in any of her fights. Like, even though every conflict in there, she wins every match, right? If Rocky had won in all the matches, then there's no like need to root for him at this point. There's no hero's journey, right? The first guy she fights kind of gets himself disqualified and it's kind of a wash, but she ends up winning. When she fights her boyfriend, she ends up winning, right? She never fights a woman.
She does fight one woman. She does.
Yeah, she fights one woman. She ends up winning, right? Like there's no journey here. It's just, okay, I'm going to win. I'm going to win. I'm going to win. So, I mean, I just felt like they left so much meat on the bone. And then when you finally get to that climax, which we both dislike for different reasons, I thought that's where like, hey, we could have really had this out. And, this could have been the big fight between, both proverbially and literally, right, about their relationship. And it just didn't connect like a good hook or an uppercut, Josh.
Yeah. See, I mean, on the one hand, like first going back to what you're saying about like, well, if we had had some of these extra types of scenes about the coach's understanding of her or whatever, and the things that you're mentioning are like all super big cliches. Like, I don't think I would have enjoyed the movie more if she had included more cliched sports drama things. So I don't necessarily want that, but it did feel like there was something missing. And then as far as the stakes go, I never for one moment thought about what you were saying, that I was bothered that like she didn't struggle enough to beat her opponents or whatever. It did seem like she was struggling, and a lot of it was an internal struggle. And part of the point here is that like nobody that she's fighting is like much of a boxer anyway. It's all of this kind of like small time little circuit.
But that's not true, because the boyfriend they already said, we're going to turn him pro in a year. He was the guy with the potential. So, I mean, I think this is just the difference of a sports fan and a non-sports fan, because I remember when we talked about like Hustle, the Adam Sandler movie, which is a pretty good movie, I was like, there's literally no stakes, because the entire resting point of the movie is like, we got to get you into the best shape ever so you can be the number one pick. And it's like, well, if he doesn't, he's still going to be a top 10 pick and make millions of dollars. And that takes me out of movies like that for a bit. But I can see, as you're not a sports fan, I can see why that doesn't bother you the way it would bother me.
Yeah. I mean, in that case, that really comes down to like me not knowing anything about that sport. And I mean, in the case of this film, not that I know anything more about boxing than I know about basketball, but I think we're talking also really just about the arc of a sports drama. The things that you mentioned of like, oh, she has to overcome the adversity or she loses some matches or whatever. That's something that happens. I mean, hell, in real boxing, I'm sure there's plenty of boxers who don't have that. They're just really good and they win all the time, right? And I mean, but in it for dramatic purposes is what you're saying, is that you want to feel her struggle. And I guess to me, I just felt like I don't need all of the sports drama cliches. I just want this like small scale working class drama. And when it felt contrived, when it was like, oh, she's got to fight her boyfriend in the final match, I was like, come on, that's bullshit. Just have her fight someone else. It's not about that. It's about their relationship. It's about her finding purpose in her life. It's about her standing up to her dad, even though that scene is not very good. So,
as opposed to Billy Elliot, where all these things work.
Yeah, I mean, and to me, as we said in our Billy Elliot episode, I don't think all of the things work. Maybe more of them do work. But, Billy Elliot had the same problem to me of the sudden change of heart of people who didn't support him and then suddenly did. So, I liked it more than you did. And I feel like you said, if we have criticisms of the same thing, it may be for different reasons, but it is a bit frustrating.
Yeah, and I just am going to disagree with you, because in Billy Elliot, with the change of heart thing, at least you see why they have the change of heart. For me, it works. For you, it doesn't. But at least we see why they've had the change of heart. Here, as you were saying, they just, okay. It just doesn't work. And I just think, like I said, whether it's the boyfriend or the dad, we're painting in broad strokes here, and we needed way more specificity and layers to these characters. So that's where, not to say there weren't good points, because there were, but that's kind of where I stand, Josh.
Yeah.
As the one who could beat you two up, I think I win this argument.
I don't think that's how you win movie arguments, but if that's what you want to tell yourself, feel free. I do feel like we have to mention the fact that, of course, her boyfriend is named Adrian. And I mean, could there not be a more explicit Rocky reference here? I think I saw someone maybe on Letterboxd or somewhere saying, like, it was quite the restraint that Karyn Kusama didn't have her say, "Yo, Adrian." At any
I
point.
know. Right. We wanted a "Yo, Adrian, I did it" or something like that.
Right. But obviously that's deliberate, and the sort of gender swapping. And to me, that's another reason where it could have just been about their relation. Like, Adrian in Rocky isn't a boxer. He doesn't fight Adrian, I
mean, wouldn't it have been more interesting if the boyfriend wasn't a boxer? And say we combine the boyfriend and the brother character, and she's just dating this nerd who's not very masculine, and the boyfriend has to come to terms with what everyone else has to come to terms with, that his girlfriend is a wrecking machine, and she's got, she can defend him in a fight. I feel like there's so many more things we could have done with these characters that we didn't do.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about that, but I definitely felt like the idea and I think they kind of play with this a bit, that, as you said, Adrian is the one who's everyone's like, oh, he's going to turn pro. He's got the potential. And here comes Diana, who is maybe a bit of a novelty that people, or at least is viewed that way. But she's now the one who's like, oh, she could really do something. She could be a sensation. And that brings up like insecurity for him, not only about not being the best boxer, but like, oh, but the best boxer is a girl and is my girlfriend. And you could have done all of that and explored all of that without having them to literally fight each other in the final bout.
Yeah, but I don't think we ever got what you're talking about, where she was going to be a sensation, because the story was told that there were no other women athletes or fighters, and the one that gets referenced is she turned pro after 3 fights, but we never are talking about Diana turning pro or getting out of like where the projects where she lives. Like, none of that ever happened. So I think we're going in like a good sparring session. We're circling each other here, Josh.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're right. I think there is, though, if not that, there is at least the idea that she's now the one getting the attention, like at the gym and from the coaches and stuff like that.
Sure.
And also, I think going back to what you were saying about like, oh no, Adrian, like he really does have, these are people who have the potential to turn pro. Like, just because they say that maybe, but early on when Diana asks the coach, like, oh, were you a professional fighter once? And he says, yes. And she asks him what happened. And he's like, what happens to everyone? I won a few matches and I lost a few matches. And it's like, nobody really, even if they do turn pro and even if they do win matches, like gets anywhere unless you're like the upper level of this.
Well, that's why I think you were the one who recommended the movie to me. But, I think maybe the all-time greatest boxing movie besides Raging Bull is
Fat City.
Fat City is an amazing movie. And talk about a movie that really showcases what it's like to be, a paycheck to paycheck fighter and having to deal with the idea of like, hey, I got to figure out something to do in my life. That, and really encapsulates what a blue collar working town does for this type of thing. That to me is the movie.
Yeah, that is a great movie. I agree. And I think that and Raging Bull also like don't rely on all those sports cliches that we're talking about. And you don't need the characters in those movies to have their like big championship moment or whatever, because that's not what the movies are about. And I felt like this movie could have been that too, but she's not, Karyn Kusama is maybe not confident enough to let go of those cliches.
Yeah. Which you do see in, other pieces from her.
Yeah. I mean, and as we say, it's a first feature and she had a lot of trouble getting it made, and maybe part of making it accessible when, she's insisting on having this Latina female protagonist is like, well, but the story needs to be a bit more basic so that mainstream audiences can embrace it. I don't know.
Yeah. And that's disappointing because, with John Sayles' involvement, he's such a good writer and, independent film patron. You think that we would have gotten a little more in there for that. And then the other issue with that, Josh, is you keep bringing up that she's Latina. Besides her physical presence, we never explore any of that, really. I mean, we do at Hector's, but I think we could have played into that a little more.
I mean, I think that's fine. I don't think every movie about someone from, with a minority protagonist needs to be like, here's their exploration of their ethnic identity.
But what I'm saying is it could have played, there's such a storied history of great Latin fighters and how they fight and why they fight. I feel like that really could have added something to this.
Yeah, maybe so. I mean, that wasn't something that I felt like was missing here per se. So, Dave, did you like this?
I did. I agree with a lot of the criticisms you guys have, but the one thing I will disagree with Jason, though, is on Michelle Rodriguez. I think we wouldn't be talking about this movie all these years later if she wasn't really, really good. And even if she didn't exactly go on to do the best stuff in the world after this, I think she really does show a lot of promise here, and it's a great role, and I think she really pulls it off.
Yeah, I mean, on all of the reviews, basically, even if they're critical, other than Roper, like that's why that Roper segment.
It's just me and Roper.
Yeah, that's why that segment stood out to me so much, because he's like the only one who is criticizing her. And all.
But again, I'm not saying she's bad. I'm just saying there's no levels to this. She's good in that very one straightforward level. I don't get. As a boxer, you got to change levels. Sometimes you got to go body. Sometimes you got to go head. And she was just staying at the same level the whole time.
Well, I think the character is very closed off, so that is just how she is, you know?
Yeah, I think she's doing a really good performance in this movie of this character. But we'll leave that aside. And should we rate this out of 5 boxing
knockouts?
gloves? Yeah, 5 knockouts. I don't know. Nothing creative there.
I'm going to be the low man on this totem pole. I gave it 2.5. It's probably between 2.5 and 3 for me. A little disappointed. I was looking forward to it. As I said, I like some of her other movies better. And just 2.5. It didn't knock me out, Josh.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't knock me out either. I give it a 3 out of 5. And I think it does have a lot of flaws, even if I think they're not the same as the flaws that you described. But it is a little underwhelming now. I can see how it would have been more striking to watch 25 years ago. But it's still worth checking out. So 3 from me. Dave, how would you rate this?
I'll go 3.5. It's a good movie. I liked it.
All right. Well, we'll come back and talk about the legacy of Girlfight. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our season on the films of the year 2000, we are talking about co-winner of the Sundance Grand Jury Prize, Girlfight, from Karyn Kusama. And we've gotten into a lot of the legacy stuff here already. As I said, this movie was unavailable for a long time. And whether we loved it or not, it seems like at least Criterion, or, some people at Criterion, are pushing this for a rediscovery. And, I guess we'll have to see how that goes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it'll work or not. I mean, I think really what we're looking at is Rodriguez and Kusama, and Michelle Rodriguez is a big star. I don't want it to sound like she's never done a good movie. I love Blue Crush, Josh. I love Blue Crush.
I do too, actually.
Yeah, Machete, there's some good stuff in there. I just think if you look overall, you're like, oh man, there's a real lot of crap that you have to wade through to get to a few of those good ones.
Yeah, I mean, and I think she obviously, as you said, she found a niche in action movies, and they were successful. And I imagine she probably enjoys making them, and it worked out well for her. It was kind of amazing to me to realize that this is her first role. Her second ever role was in The Fast and the Furious, and then that just kind of became her thing.
Right. And Resident Evil's the year after that, and Blood Rain's 2 years after that. But that's what I saw in this movie is like, hey, this person could be a female Statham or Schwarzenegger or something like that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I see that too. But like I said, I feel like I could also have seen the potential from this movie of her doing more serious, dramatic things, working with someone like John Sayles. And why she didn't do that, I don't know. Maybe it's because that wasn't what interested her. Maybe it was because it wasn't what she was offered. And maybe she just doesn't have the range, like you're saying. But I do think she can bring some genuine emotion to her roles, even in those action movies. I'm not a fan of the Fast and Furious movies, but, she holds her own there. And I always liked her on Lost. I know you were a big Lost fan as well, and she was on that show for quite a while.
So this is my point, right? So I got to move away from this idea of, oh, well, she was never, offered these things. Because Lost, she did play a serious character. And I think, like you're saying, maybe she wasn't going to get like the Nicole Kidman roles, but I'm sure she could have gotten some good indie dramatic movies if that's what she wanted to do. And I'm not faulting her for becoming action hero Jones over here. So I just don't think a lot of them are. It's like The Rock, right? You want to make action movies, make them all day, but like, let's make some good ones.
Yeah. I mean, and we can argue that we don't like the Fast and Furious movies, which, Jason, I don't think you've even seen a Fast and Furious movie, right?
That's correct, Josh. But I hate them all.
All right. And I have seen almost all of them. And I definitely have seen all the ones that she's in because she's not in all of them. And I don't like them, but they're massively popular and weirdly actually have a lot of critical acclaim, at least for certain ones. And I know Dave would be sitting here as a staunch Fast and Furious defender.
Oh, yeah. They rock. They absolutely rock.
But Josh, here, this is the point. I'm not knocking like picking up a franchise. I just don't want to see, like, if it would be like, hey, man, Robert Downey Jr. did one movie and then he's Iron Man. And then all we ever see from him for the rest of his life is Iron Man type roles. I'd be disappointed with that.
Right. I mean, and that's kind of what happened. I mean, he did a lot of stuff before, but once he became Iron Man, that was just kind of all he did for like 15 years.
I know. And now we're finally getting to the point where we're getting other things from him. I just think I'd like to see her do other things, Josh. That's it.
I mean, and she still could. What is she? She's in her 40s or whatever right now. I mean, she's got hopefully a long continued career ahead of her where she can take some more chances, and maybe she will.
I mean, I have to rewatch it, I guess, but I remember thinking she really was really flat for me in Dungeons and Dragons this past year.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that movie was fun, and I thought she was solid, but it wasn't the most memorable performance in that film, certainly. Karyn Kusama has struggled a bit. I think, as I said, because this movie wasn't as big a hit as maybe she hoped or as it could have been, she had a tough time finding her next projects. And it may be, what she was looking for. Could she have done another $1 million budget indie drama? Maybe so. Maybe more easily than what she ended up doing, which was she also moved into this big blockbuster realm. And the next thing she did was the live action adaptation of Aeon Flux starring Charlize Theron. And it was a flop and it's bad, but it certainly is a big leap up from a movie like this.
Well, you got that, and then Jennifer's Body, which I know has been reassessed, but after watching it last night and this morning, your initial assessment was right, Josh. But where she really shines is as a TV director and producer. We know she directed the pilot and is a producer on Yellow Jackets. I think she probably directed some Breaking Bad. But I love both of her last two movies. The Invitation is my favorite and one of the best single location thrillers, I guess you would call it, of the last decade, I'd say. And I know you don't like Destroyer, but I thought Destroyer was really good.
Yeah, I hated Destroyer. I really disliked that. And not only is it a bad movie, but it's one of the worst performances Nicole Kidman has ever given.
No, totally wrong, Josh. You and I, you talk about Michelle Rodriguez here, and I talk about her here, and you talk about Nicole Kidman here. And we're just on opposite sides on some of these. But I think this is her niche, is like doing these kind of strong voiced independent features. I stick with that, man.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I didn't like Destroyer, I agree that that's what I would want to see her do. Of course, I think she's still chasing the blockbuster thing. She had a supposed reboot of Dracula from Universal Pictures that was ready to go that ended up falling apart, but she's obviously pursuing those bigger Hollywood things. I'm with you though on The Invitation. The Invitation is fantastic. Definitely the best movie that she's directed. And I'd love to see her do like not Dracula, but maybe a horror thriller movie on that smaller scale where I think that she worked really, really well. I do love Yellow Jackets though. And obviously she's got this thriving TV career. So that's worked out for her.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Yellow Jackets as well. The Invitation was co-written by her husband,
yes.
Correct?
Yes.
And so I mean, her husband is part of like a big, they're comedy or horror. Are they comedy or horror writers, Josh?
Well, I mean, The Invitation is certainly a horror film, so that it may
No, but I think they were like pigeonholed as like mainstream X writers. So they wrote this as like a complete left turn for them. And I think it worked out for all three, both the writers and Kusama.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like he's got a kind of a mix. I mean, I think they met in terms of their personal life because he was one of the writers on Aeon Flux, which of course is not a comedy. And he also, I'm just looking at his credits, he also worked on Destroyer, with her, as well as on Crazy Beautiful, talking about Blue Crush, another John Stockwell film that I think is quite good, but, has done comedy Ride Along and the sequel to Ride Along. So, like a lot of screenwriters, has a varied career, worked on The Tuxedo with Jackie Chan and Jennifer Love Hewitt.
So we're talking about B-level mainstream comedies,
Right.
and they decided hey, we have more to offer than that. And they showed it. And I think that was what worked out really nicely for them. And it really helped her as well, because we knew what Girlfight was, but The Invitation is what really put Karyn Kusama on my map.
Yeah, no, I agree. I would love to see her do another movie like that. And that is a great movie. I think it's on Netflix right now, or it has been. If people haven't seen it, it's definitely worth checking out. Otherwise, in this cast, Michelle Rodriguez is really the only actor here who's gone on to a big career. I mean, there's some people here. Paul Calderón, who plays her father, is probably the most successful character actor among this cast, has done a lot of TV stuff, including Boardwalk Empire, Fear the Walking Dead, and Bosch. I was looking at other people, Jaime Tirelli, who plays the coach, and the actors who play her brother and her boyfriend, Ray Santiago and Santiago Douglas. I mean, they have credits here, consistently, but nothing notable particularly. No one here has really had a breakout the way that Michelle Rodriguez did.
There's one. Ray Santiago is Pablo, one of Ash's little sidekicks on Ash vs. Evil Dead. So.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I knew he looked familiar to me, and I think I must have skimmed past that or looked at his movie credits mostly, because I did watch the first season of that. So, I mean, all doing okay, but I think this could have been a bigger breakout maybe for some of these people if it had been a bigger hit.
Well, it wasn't.
No. So, anything else you want to say about the legacy of this film, Jason?
No, go watch Fat City.
I agree. Go watch Fat City. Go listen to our episode on Raging Bull. And watch Raging Bull too. I mean, come on. But lots of good boxing content. So that is Girlfight, and that is this episode of Awesome Movie Year. You can fight us online and on social media.
Get into the social media squared circle with us, Josh. Get in the ring. We're at awesomemovieyear.com, Awesome Movie Year on Facebook and Instagram, Awesome Movie Pod on Boxer, Twitter, X. Crap. Yeah. Leave me alone. Fuck off. I'm Jason Harris Comedy, or J Harris Comedy on all the socials. Go for Jason on Letterboxd, where Dave continues to overrate movies on a daily basis.
You can find some old things from me at joshbellhateseverything.com. I am at Josh Bell Hates Everything on Facebook, at Signal Bleed on Twitter X, as well as on Blue Sky and on Letterboxd. And if you're on Letterboxd and you watch this movie or any movie that we talk about, tag your reviews Awesome Movie Year. We'd love to know what you think about the movies that we talk about on this show. And you can listen to our producer, David Rosen's awesome podcast, Piecing It Together.
Check out Piecing It Together wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow us on social media at PiecingPod. And check out that Letterboxd by David Rosen. I think movies are great, and they deserve a nice little bump in the ratings.
What a positive attitude, yes.
Jason, what's in our next episode?
Josh, it's time for the best picture of the year 2000. It's a movie called Gladiator.
That is it.
Are you not entertained?
We'll find out. Tune in next time for Gladiator. Thanks for listening to Awesome Movie Year.
Thank you for listening to Awesome Movie Year. Make sure to follow Awesome Movie Year on Facebook, at Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter, and at Awesome Movie Year on Instagram. And if you like the show, review us and rate us with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
An All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.